day my father looked me in the eyes and said, "Everything goes to your sister. You were never really mine to worry about." I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't raise my voice. I just smiled. A small, quiet smile. Because I already knew something he didn't. Something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. Sitting in a sealed envelope, tucked inside my bag, right there in that very room. And today, I am going to tell you everything. Every detail. From the very beginning. My name is Sarah. And this is the story of the family that forgot me, and the grandmother who never did. I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside. A 2-story home in a quiet colony, with a small garden in the front that my mother watered every morning. We had a family car that got washed every Sunday. My parents went to every parent-teacher meeting. We had dinner together most nights. From the outside, we looked like exactly the kind of family people imagine when they picture a happy home. But appearances, as I would spend the next 24 years learning, can hold a great deal of silence inside them. There were 2 children in our family. Me, Sarah, and my sister Neha, who was 2 years older. And from the very beginning, from the time I was old enough to notice things, it was clear that Neha and I did not occupy the same space in our father's heart. I don't say this to be dramatic. I say it because it is simply true. The way certain facts about a place become true over time. You don't decide them, you just come to know them. The way you know which floorboard creaks or which window lets in a draft in winter. Neha was the firstborn. She was bright, obedient, and she had a way of saying exactly the right thing at exactly the right moment. My father adored her. He lit up when she walked into a room. He saved her drawings from school. He remembered the names of her friends. With me, it was different, not cruel. I want to be precise about that. My father never hit me, never screamed at me, never told me directly that I was less important. But there is a particular kind of pain that lives in absence, not in action. In the report card that doesn't get mentioned, in the achievement that earns a nod instead of a celebration, in the Sunday that passes and no one thinks to ask how your week was. That was how it was with me. When Neha got 90% on her board exams, my father took the whole family to a restaurant, the nice one, with tablecloths that we only went to on special occasions. He ordered extra dessert. He made a toast. He called my uncle to share the news. When I got 92% on the same exams 2 years later, my father looked at my mark sheet, nodded slowly, and said, "Your sister still scored higher in class 10, you know, in absolute marks." Then he folded the paper and handed it back to me. I went to my room and sat on my bed for a long time that evening. I wasn't even sure what I was feeling. It wasn't quite sadness. It was something quieter than sadness. Something that had no sharp edges, just weight. My mother was not a cruel woman. I think about her often, even now, and I believe she genuinely loved me in the way she knew how. But she had spent so many years deferring to my father, in small things, in large things, in everything, that she had lost the habit of standing her ground on anything. She saw what was happening. I am certain she saw it. But seeing and doing something about it are very different things, and my mother had learned to confuse the two. So she stayed quiet, and I learned to expect that. The one person, the one who never made me feel invisible was my grandmother, my father's mother, Nani. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall by the time I was old enough to remember her clearly, with silver hair she kept in a neat braid and a pair of reading glasses she was always misplacing. She had lived alone after my grandfather passed, in a flat not far from ours, and she came to stay with us for 3 long years when I was in college. My parents said it was because she was getting older and they didn't want her alone. But I always suspected she came because she wanted to be near me. Every morning, without fail, Nani woke up before anyone else. By the time I stumbled into the kitchen for my early class, she was already there. Chai on the stove, 2 cups set out, the newspaper folded on the table even though neither of us read it at that hour. We would sit together in that quiet kitchen, just the 2 of us, while the rest of the house slept. And she would ask me things. Real things. Not how are your marks, or what does your professor say? But what are you thinking about these days? And is there anyone at college who is truly your friend? And what made you laugh this week, Sarah? Tell me something that made you laugh. No one else in that house ever asked me what made me laugh. She had a saying she returned to often. She would cup her chai in both hands, look out the kitchen window at the small garden, and say, "Sarah, remember, the tree that bends in the storm doesn't break. It is the rigid ones that snap." I would nod, the way you nod at things you hear but don't yet understand. I understand now. Those 3 years she lived with us were, I think, the years that kept me intact. I didn't know that then. I only knew that mornings felt manageable because she was in them. When I was 23, I got a job offer in Pune, a digital marketing firm, entry level, modest salary, but with real scope for growth if you worked hard. I had applied quietly, without telling anyone, because I had learned by then that sharing plans with my family before they were finalized only gave people the opportunity to talk you out of them. When the offer came through, I told them at dinner. The reaction was immediate. Neha put down her fork and said, with that particular tone she had, not quite concerned, not quite dismissive, but somewhere in between. Oh, wow. Pune? That's really far. Do you even know anyone there? My mother looked at my father. My father set down his glass. You're leaving, he said. It wasn't a question. It's a good opportunity, Dad. I've been looking for. Now, he said? Your sister's wedding is next year. We'll need help with the preparations. There are things to coordinate, relatives coming from 3 cities. You're going to leave now? I looked at him across the table. I thought about all the Sundays, all the report cards, all the dinners where Neha's day was discussed in detail and mine was not discussed at all. I said, as carefully as I could, Dad, this is my career. I've worked hard for this opportunity. I can still come back and help with the wedding. It's not until next year. He looked at me the way he sometimes did, like I had said something in a language he didn't quite speak. Then he said, your sister never ran away when the family needed her. Neha had never needed to run anywhere. Neha had everything she needed delivered to her within the walls of that house. But I didn't say that. I had learned, over 23 years, to swallow certain truths at the dinner table. I said, I'll be back for the wedding. I promise. My father didn't speak to me for 3 weeks after that. I moved to Pune anyway. The first few months were hard in the way that new beginnings are always hard. The unfamiliar city, the tiny rented room, the colleagues whose names I couldn't remember yet, the evenings that stretched longer than I expected. I had underestimated how much energy it takes to build a life from scratch, even a small one. But I kept going. I worked hard. Harder than I needed to, maybe, because work was the one place where effort was directly rewarded, where nothing depended on being someone's favorite. I got my first promotion at 14 months. I made a small group of friends, 4 people who became the kind of friends who check in when you go quiet, who show up without being asked. And every month, on the first Sunday, I called my grandmother. Our calls were long, sometimes an hour, sometimes longer. She would tell me about the neighbors, about the garden, about a television show she had started watching and wanted to discuss in unnecessary detail. And she would ask me, always, are you okay, Sarah? Truly okay? And I would tell her the truth, which I told no one else. She was 78 by then, still sharp, still warm, still entirely herself. But I noticed, over those months, that she tired more easily. That sometimes mid-sentence she would pause and I could hear her breathing. I noticed, but I did not let myself think about what I was noticing. Then one evening, a Thursday, I remember because I had just come back from a late meeting and I was still in my work clothes. My phone rang and her name appeared on the screen. She never called me. That was our arrangement. I called her, first Sunday of every month. She never called. I answered immediately. Her voice was slower than usual. Softer. She said, Sarah Beta, I need to tell you something. But not on the phone. I would rather you were here. Can you come this weekend? I said, of course, Nani. I'll come Saturday. She said, good. Saturday. Come in the morning if you can. I said I would. We talked for a few more minutes. Nothing significant, just her voice and mine. And then we said good night. I booked a train ticket that same night. The Saturday morning train. I set 3 alarms. I didn't make it in time. My grandmother passed away on Friday morning. Quietly, in her sleep, in the room she had been given in my parents' house when she came to stay again a few months earlier. The doctor said it was her heart. He said she would not have suffered. I found out at 7 in the morning on Friday from a woman named Mrs. Sharma, my grandmother's oldest friend, a tiny woman with a loud laugh who lived 2 lanes from my parents. My grandmother had given Mrs. Sharma my number. My grandmother had thought to do this. She had known, I think, that when the time came, Mrs. Sharma might need to reach me. My father had called Neha the night before. He had called my uncle in Chandigarh. He had called the Pandit, the neighbors, a cousin I had met perhaps 4 times in my life. He had not called me. He had decided, and I have thought about this decision many times since. He had decided that I did not need to be called. Mrs. Sharma's voice was gentle. She said, Beta, your Nani has left us. Last night, peacefully. I am so sorry. I thought you should know. I sat down on the floor of my small apartment in Pune, still in yesterday's clothes, and I cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was a child. Not the quiet, contained kind of crying. I had taught myself over years of being someone who handled things alone. But the deep, uncontrolled kind from somewhere below the chest, where things live that don't have words. I cried for a long time. Then I washed my face, packed a bag, and went to the train station. I arrived at my parents' house on Friday afternoon. The house was full of people. Relatives, neighbors, the pandit, women from the colony who had come to help with food. The smell of incense was heavy in the air. Everything was already arranged, already decided, already done. My father saw me come in. He looked at me, not with grief, not with apology, and said, in front of 6 people who stood close enough to hear every word, "We didn't want to disturb your career. Not, we should have called you. Not, I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Not, I know how much she meant to you. We didn't want to disturb your career." I stood in the doorway of my parents' home with my bag still on my shoulder, surrounded by the smell of incense and the sound of people moving quietly through rooms, and I felt something close inside me. Not dramatically, not like a door slamming, more like a window, very gently, being pulled shut from the inside. I said nothing. I put my bag down. I went to the room where my grandmother had been staying. I sat beside where she had lain, and I spoke to her quietly, just a few words, just enough to say what I needed to say. Then I stayed through the ceremony. I did everything that needed to be done, and when it was over, I went to bed in my old room and I lay in the dark for a long time. 2 days after the funeral, a call came. A man named Mr. Prasad, from a law firm in the city. He introduced himself as the executor of my grandmother's estate. He said, "Miss Sarah, your grandmother left very specific instructions regarding her will. She has requested, and this is written clearly into the document, that I contact you personally and that you be present for a private reading before the full family meeting is convened. Would you be able to come to our office tomorrow morning?" I said I would be there. I did not tell my parents about the call. The next morning, I told them I was going out for a walk. I took an auto to the address Mr. Prasad had given me, a quiet office building near the court, 3rd floor, a firm that had clearly been there for many years. The receptionist offered me water. I sat in a chair across from a large wooden desk and waited. Mr. Prasad was a measured man, perhaps 60, with careful eyes and a calm way of speaking that I immediately trusted. He opened a folder. He explained that my grandmother had executed this will 3 years ago, with 2 witnesses and notarization, and that she had also. This was the part that stopped my breath. She had also arranged for a cognitive assessment to be done at the same time, so that the document could not later be challenged on the basis of her mental state. She had thought of everything. The will was straightforward in its instructions. My grandmother had a fixed deposit account, opened in the 1980s, added to steadily and quietly for decades, never mentioned to anyone in the family. The total value, with interest accumulated over 40 years of careful saving, was 47 lakh rupees. Every rupee of it she had left to me alone. And there was a letter. Mr. Prasad slid it across the desk. It was in an envelope with my name written on it in my grandmother's handwriting. The same handwriting I had seen on birthday cards, on recipes she had written out for me, on a note she had tucked into my bag the morning I left for Pune that I had saved in my phone as a photograph. I opened it. It said, "Sarah, my dear, I have watched you for 24 years carry weight that this family was too comfortable to notice. I have watched you fold yourself smaller so that others could take up more space. I have watched you accept less. Always quietly, always without complaint, because you were told, in 1,000 small ways, that less was what you deserved. I want you to know that I saw all of it, every single thing. And I want you to know that I disagreed. This money is not charity, and it is not pity. It is what was always owed to the child who asked for nothing and deserved everything. Buy something that is entirely yours. Build something that belongs to no one else. And remember, the tree that bends in the storm doesn't break. It is the one that was strong enough to stay. All my love, always. Nani." I sat in that office chair and I held that letter with both hands and I read it 3 times. And then I set it on my lap and I cried, quietly, in front of Mr. Prasad, who had the kindness to look out his window and give me the privacy of pretending not to notice. It wasn't the money. I want to be clear about that. It was not the money. It was the letter. It was the knowledge that she had seen me, that she had been paying attention all along, that she had not only seen me, but had done something about it, carefully and quietly, over years, so that when the moment came, I would know without any possible doubt that I had mattered to someone who mattered deeply to me. Friends, agar yeh kahani aap ko chu rahi hai. Agar aap by kabhi a's garmain, the jahan aap invisible feel karte thi. To please is video ko like Kareen. Agar aap chate hain ki a's are emotional sachi kahanyan sinayan. To subscribe button zarur dabayan. Comment main batayan. Kya apni by kabi apni garmain khud ko akela mehsus kiya? Kiakoida jo apko truly dek saktada. Main har comment pajatahun. Ab age bajatahain. Kyunki jo abhihwa. Woto surf sharatthi. The full family meeting was scheduled for 2 days later at Mr. Prasad's office. This time, everyone was there. My father, my mother, my sister Neha, my uncle from Chandigarh who had arrived for the funeral and stayed, and 2 cousins. They arranged themselves in chairs along one side of the conference table. I sat alone on the other side. My father looked at me when I walked in, but said nothing. I think he had assumed. And this was very like him, I realized. He had assumed that whatever was happening was a formality, that it would be settled quickly, that the money would be divided in a way that made sense to him. He had the look of a man waiting for something he considered already decided. Mr. Prasad read the will aloud, clearly, slowly, every word. I watched my father's face. I have replayed this moment many times in the years since, trying to find the right word for what I saw move across his features. It passed through confusion first, a brief, genuine puzzlement, as though the words weren't connecting properly. Then, disbelief. The specific quality of disbelief that comes when something contradicts a fact you had never thought to question. And then, underneath the disbelief, something I had genuinely never seen on my father's face in 24 years of watching it. Fear. Not the fear of something dangerous. The fear of something that cannot be undone. He said, she must have been confused. She was old. She didn't fully understand what she was signing. We should have the document looked at. Mr. Prasad did not raise his voice. He did not shift in his chair. He simply said, Mr. Verma, the will was executed and notarized 3 years ago. It was witnessed by 2 independent individuals. And at the time of signing, your mother also arranged for a formal cognitive assessment, which I have on file. Her mental capacity at the time of the will is thoroughly documented. The document is entirely valid and will not be challenged successfully. The room was very quiet. My uncle cleared his throat. One of my cousins looked at the table. Neha looked at me, and for the first time in the whole of my life, I saw something in her expression that I had never seen there before. Not boredom, not the mild superiority she had always carried so easily. It was the look of someone who had assumed a door was permanently open and had just, in this room, heard it close. My father tried one more time. He leaned forward slightly and said, in a tone that was almost gentle, Sarah, Beta, whatever our differences have been, we are still family. Your grandmother would have wanted us to come together, to share this. As a family, I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about a 10-year-old girl carrying her report card down a hallway, hoping. I thought about a dinner table where one daughter's week was mapped in detail and another's was never asked about. I thought about a train ticket booked in the middle of the night and a phone that never rang. I thought about standing in a doorway with a bag on my shoulder and hearing, we didn't want to disturb your career. I thought about a kitchen at 6 in the morning, 2 cups of chai, and someone who asked me what made me laugh. I said, Dad, you're right. Nani believed in family. I let one beat of silence pass. Then I said, that is exactly why she left this to me. I picked up my bag from beside my chair. I thanked Mr. Prasad. I walked out of the conference room, through the reception area, and into the corridor. I pressed the button for the lift. The lift arrived. I got in. My phone began to ring before I reached the ground floor. It rang for the next 4 hours. My father, my mother, my uncle, Neha, numbers I didn't recognize. I did not answer any of them. I turned the volume down and put the phone in my bag and took an auto to the station and waited for my train back to Pune. The weeks that followed were quieter than I had expected. I had braced myself for confrontation, for visits, for letters, for some escalation. But the confrontation didn't come. Instead, there was a long stretch of messages, some angry and some bewildered and some attempting a kind of guilt that was really just a request. And then slowly, over months, even those stopped. My life in Pune continued. I went to work. I saw my friends. I went to the gym on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. I started cooking properly. Not just the quick meals I had been living on, but real cooking. The kind my grandmother had taught me in pieces over the years. I made her dal on a Sunday and sat with it at my small kitchen table and felt, for a complicated moment, both her presence and her absence at the same time. 3 months after the will reading, my mother called from a number I didn't recognize. A neighbor's phone, I think. She would have known I wouldn't pick up her number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I picked up. She didn't ask for anything. That was the first thing I noticed. She said, Sarah, I'm not calling to argue or to ask you to reconsider anything. I needed to tell you something. Her voice was careful, like she had been practicing. She said, I should have called you when Nani passed. We should have called you immediately. That was wrong. I was wrong. Your father was wrong. I'm sorry. She paused. That's all. I just wanted to say that. I sat with that for a moment. My mother, who had spent 24 years learning not to say things out loud, saying this out loud. I said, "Mom, I know." She said, "Are you okay?" And I thought about the question, really thought about it, the way you can when someone finally asks it in a way that means they actually want the answer. I said, for the first time in a long time, yes, I really am. We talked for perhaps 20 minutes, about nothing in particular. It was the longest real conversation I had had with my mother in years. When we hung up, I sat for a while with my phone in my hand, and I felt something that took me a moment to identify. It wasn't happiness, exactly. It was more like the feeling after a very long walk, tired in the right way, and strangely light. I used the inheritance carefully, the way my grandmother had always done things. I didn't spend it all at once. I enrolled in a UX design course I had been looking at for 2 years, a proper certification, the kind that opened doors. I paid for it without hesitation, for the first time in my life spending a significant amount of money on myself without calculating whether I deserved it. I painted the walls of my apartment a deep terracotta that I had loved in a magazine and never thought to choose for myself. I bought a small plot of land outside the city. My grandmother's advice, one of the things she had repeated over our kitchen table mornings, land stays, Sarah. Other things come and go, land stays. And I kept her letter. I had it framed, the actual letter, in her actual handwriting, in a simple frame with a thin border. It hangs on the wall above my desk, where I see it every morning when I sit down to work and every evening when I shut my laptop. On the hard days, the days when I doubt myself, or feel that familiar old weight settling back on my shoulders, or catch myself wondering if I am too much or too difficult or too demanding for the space I take up, I read it. Or sometimes I just look at it. Just the shape of her handwriting is enough. You are not the difficult one. You are the strongest one. The tree that bends in the storm. She was right. It doesn't break. Sarah did not get justice by raising her voice or demanding what she was owed or making anyone feel the full weight of what they had done. She got it the way most real justice arrives. Quietly, carried forward by someone who loved her, in an envelope that had been waiting for exactly the right moment. And maybe that is the truest thing about being the one who is overlooked. The people who see you, who really see you, are often already doing something about it, long before you realize it. Long before you even know you needed them to. If you are watching this and you are the Sarah in your family, hold on. Someone sees you, even when the room feels empty, even when the phone doesn't ring, even when the table moves on without asking about your week. Someone is watching, and they are on your side. And sometimes the proof arrives in a sealed envelope at exactly the moment you need it most. If this story touched you deeply, please let us know in the comments. Were you ever that person in your home whom everyone overlooked? Was there someone who truly saw you? I genuinely read your comments. Every single one. Like this video if you think what Sarah experienced was right. Subscribe. I bring a new emotional story every week, and each one is for those who feel like no one is listening to their story. Keep notifications on.